Hey everyone, today I'm going to cover a topic that ranks close to number one in my video requests as of late, which is what's the truth behind the 70 weeks of Daniel that we get from Daniel chapter 9. So, let's do it. Shalom everybody, and welcome to Beit Tefillah. I put quite a bit of what I'm teaching in this video inside another video that I did recently, but I want to make a standalone video on this topic to make it easier to find for those who are researching Daniel chapter 9. There is so much going on in chapter 9, and I touch on a few of those things briefly, but the main point of this video is to show that contrary to Messianic belief, Daniel chapter 9 is in no way talking about some kind of New Testament Messiah. Not at all. I'm also going to focus on the tribe of Yehuda, or Judah, as we know it today, and I'm going to leave discussion of the other dispersed tribes for another time or another video. But before we get into Daniel chapter 9, we need to get a little bit of the backstory, so let's get back to the beginning of Daniel. Whenever we research something, we should always start at the beginning instead of pulling the last few verses out of Daniel chapter 9. What about everything that came before it? If we don't read what came before it, we're not going to understand what we're looking at, and then we're going to make all kinds of mistakes like they do in churchianity of today. So, in Daniel chapter 1, verse 1, in the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, sovereign of Yehuda, Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babel, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. So there we have the account of King Nebuchadnezzar capturing Jerusalem. Let's take note of the very next verse in Daniel 1:2. And Yahuwah gave Jehoiakim, sovereign of Yehuda, into his hand with some of the utensils of the house of Elohim, which he brought to the land of Shinar, to the house of his mighty one. So this was all sanctioned and done and allowed by Elohim. And Yahuwah gave Jehoiakim, the sovereign of Judah, into his hand. Into whose hand? Nebuchadnezzar. Just kind of said, take them. Take all that stuff with you. He just gave permission for all that. Then after this, Nebuchadnezzar ordered that young men who were wise and without spot or blemish would be picked up from Judah and taken over into Babel so they could teach the Chaldean language and writing to the Babylonians. And then we read this verse in Daniel 1:6. Now among them were from the sons of Yehuda, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Those later three are more well known probably by their Babylonian names of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So, Daniel was from the tribe of Yehuda, or what we would call today a Jew. That's very easily established. But do you remember why Elohim allowed them to be taken into captivity? Elohim had commanded all of Israel the following, which we can read in Leviticus chapter 25. And Yahuwah spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, When you come into the land which I give you, then the land shall observe a Sabbath to Yahuwah. 6 years you sow your field, and 6 years you prune your vineyard and gather in its fruit. But in the 7th year the land is to have a Sabbath of rest, a Sabbath to Yahuwah. Do not sow your field, and do not prune your vineyard. Do not reap what grows of its own in your harvest, and do not gather the grapes of your unpruned vine, for it is a year of rest for the land. And the Sabbath of the land shall be to you for food, food for you and your servant, for your female servant, your hired servant, and for the stranger who sojourns with you, for all of your livestock and the beasts that are in your land. All of its crops are for food. Now, the people did not keep the Sabbath as Elohim commanded them, so we read what happens as the result of that sin in 2 Chronicles 36, 18-21. And all the utensils from the house of Elohim, great and small, and the treasures of the house of Yahuwah, and the treasures of the sovereign and of his leaders, all these he brought to Babel. And they burned the house of Elohim, and broke down the wall of Jerusalem, and burned all its palaces with fire, and destroyed all its valuable utensils. And those who escaped from the sword he exiled to Babel, where they became servants to him and his sons, until the reign of Persia. Remember Persia. In order to fill the word of Yahuwah by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. As long as she lay waste, she kept Sabbath until 70 years were completed. So there's the 70 years of exile. Every 7 years, the land must rest for an entire year. This is known as the Shemitah year. The people did not observe the Shemitah at all during a 490-year period. Well, what's 490 divided by 7 if the land's to rest every 7 years? 70. So that's the amount of years they were exiled. That's why in 2 Chronicles 36:21 we hear, as long as she lay waste, she kept Sabbath until 70 years were completed. That was spoken by the prophet Jeremiah in Jeremiah 25:11. And all this land shall be a ruin and a waste, and these nations shall serve the sovereign of Babel 70 years. So this is why Yehuda, or Judah, or the Jews were taken into captivity for 70 years, just as prophesied. So now that we know why Yehuda was exiled from their land and taken into captivity, we can move to Daniel chapter 9. The first thing I want to hit before I jump into this is to mention that when the angel or messenger Gabriel was speaking to Daniel and he was talking about 70 weeks, that's not the same as 70 years, of course. Let's remember that Shabbat means rest, whether it's our weekly rest from our labors or the rest of our land every 7 years. Leviticus 25:4, but in the 7th year the land is to have a Sabbath of rest, a Sabbath to Yahuwah. And let's also take note that in Daniel chapter 9, it's not speaking about weeks as in 7 days, but it's referring to weeks of years. Okay? After all, the Shemitah pattern is to work the ground for 6 years and let it rest on the 7th year, just as our Shabbat pattern is to work for 6 days and rest on the 7th day. This is very important to understand and get this part right. This is why they were kicked out of their land and sent into captivity, because they did not obey and observe the land Sabbath, or the Shemitah. Now right now I want to ask everybody to please set aside any preconceived notions that you may have about this chapter, as it's very important that we simply read it and understand what it says without it flowing through some kind of messianic filter first. Okay? Let's read the whole section of Daniel chapter 9 that we're discussing today, of what the messenger Gabriel said to Daniel. It's recorded in Daniel 9:24-27. 70 weeks are decreed for your people and for your set-apart city, to put an end to the transgression and to seal up sins and to cover crookedness and to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophet, and to anoint the most set apart. Know then and understand from the going forth of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince is 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It shall be built again with streets and a trench, but in times of affliction. And after the 62 weeks Messiah shall be cut off and have naught. And the people of a coming prince shall destroy the city and the set-apart place. And the end of it is with a flood. And wastes are decreed and fighting until the end. And he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. And in the middle of the week he shall put an end to slaughtering and meal offering. And on the wing of abominations he shall lay waste, even until the complete end, in that which is decreed and poured out on the one who lays waste. Okay, 70 weeks. Gabriel told Daniel that was going to take for all this to happen. But next we're going to find out about Gabriel breaking it down into 2 parts at time. So let's start with Daniel 9:25. Know then and understand from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince is 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It shall be built again with streets and a trench, but in times of affliction. So Gabriel separated out 7 weeks and 62 weeks, 2 different time frames. But if you add those up, that's only 69 weeks, and he said 70, so where's the other week? I'll get to that in a second. But why are there 2 different time frames? Well, there's 2 different temples being talked about, right? And Daniel was from Judah, so let's remember that. We've got Gabriel saying for the first part, from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince is 7 weeks. That's the first part. Messiah the Prince rebuilding Jerusalem. Remember that as well. Daniel 9:26. And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off and have naught. And the people of a coming prince shall destroy the city and the set-apart place. And the end of it is with a flood, and wastes are decreed, and fighting until the end. Okay, by the time we get to the end of this time frame being spoken about, that's at the end of the 490 years, or 70 weeks, and the city and temple is destroyed again. Daniel 9:27. And he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. Ah, there's the 70 weeks. Okay, that's the missing week. 70 weeks total. I'm going to stop there for now and concentrate on the first part to clear up this Messiah the Prince. This has absolutely nothing to do with a New Testament Messiah. First, let me mention something. The Hebrew word Mashiach occurs 39 times in Tanakh. Only twice is it ever translated as Messiah. Shockingly, that's in Daniel chapter 9. And that's why I have to do this video. Mashiach does not mean Messiah, as people know that title or description today, as the one who's going to usher in the Messianic age. That's what you think of when you think of Messiah, but that's not what the word Mashiach means. Mashiach means anointed. That's all it means. Priests were anointed, so were kings, like King Shaul and King David. They were both Mashiach or anointed. Okay? And it's also possible for somebody to be not part of Yisrael to be called a Mashiach. Okay? For an example, a Gentile king named Cyrus. Most people don't realize this. But if you read Isaiah 45:1, you can read about Elohim calling King Cyrus a Mashiach. And we read Elohim say the following to Cyrus in Isaiah 45:4. For the sake of Yaakov my servant and of Yisrael my chosen, I also call you by your name. I give you a title, though you have not known me. So here's a king who doesn't know Elohim at all, and Elohim anoints him and makes him a Mashiach. Once again, the Hebrew word Mashiach, which means anointed, does not mean Messiah in the way most people think it does today. It simply means one who is anointed and set apart for the purpose of serving Elohim. Cyrus, or the king of Persia, is an anointed ruler or prince, and what does Elohim have him do? We can hear that in Isaiah 45:13. I have stirred him up in righteousness, and all his ways I make straight. He builds my city and lets my exiles go, not for price, nor for reward, declares Yahuwah of hosts. And we can read in Ezra 1:1-3. Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, remember I told you to remember Persia? That the word of Yahuwah by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. Yahuwah stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, sovereign of Persia, to proclaim throughout all his reign, and also in writing, saying, Thus said King Cyrus of Persia, Yahuwah Elohim of the heavens has given me all the reins of the earth, and he has commanded me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Yehudah. Who is among you of all his people? His Elohim be with him, and let him go to Jerusalem, which is in Yehudah, and build the house of Yahuwah, Elohim of Yisrael. He is Elohim, which is in Yerushalayim. So here King Cyrus is telling all the Jews in Babel, go home. Go back to Jerusalem and build your temple. What a wonderful thing. That's what they were waiting for. Let's hear Daniel 9:25 again. Know then and understand from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince is 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It shall be built again with streets and a trench, but in times of affliction. And we heard in Isaiah 45:13, I have stirred him up in righteousness, and all his ways I make straight. He builds my city and lets my exiles go. So the anointed Mashiach, prince or king, restored the Jews to Jerusalem and proclaimed that the temple of Yahuwah be rebuilt. Let's remember that Daniel prayed and made supplication to Elohim so that Yehudim's exile could be over, so that they could return to Jerusalem. They did. That was fulfilled back in that day, having nothing whatsoever to do with some kind of New Testament Messiah. Not at all. This is just so simple. People just have to read the story and follow along with it. You know, but you got to read it in context. That's the catch. Don't just pull a couple verses out. Now let's take a closer look at the second part of Gabriel's time frame that he told Daniel. Daniel 9:26. And after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off and have naught, and the people of a coming prince shall destroy the city and the set apart place. Now notice this just says the anointed shall be cut off. It doesn't say the anointed prince this time. This is hundreds of years later. This is referring to the high priest or the Levitical priesthood. The coming prince or ruler of Rome destroys the city in the set-apart place, which is the second temple. Daniel 9:27, and he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. And in the middle of the week he shall put an end to slaughtering and meal offering. And on the wing of abominations he shall lay waste, even until the complete end that which is decreed and poured out on the one who lays waste. So we can see that the anointed of Elohim is cut off, the set-apart place or the temple is destroyed, and therefore the slaughterings or sacrifices and meal offerings are stopped, as they can only be done in the temple, in the place where Elohim chooses. Well, that can't happen with a temple gone. Okay, it's not possible. So they have nothing or naught at this point. There's another definition to the word Mashiach. We can read it in 1 Chronicles 16, 14 to 22. He is Yahuwah our Elohim. His right rulings are in all the earth. Remember his covenant forever. The word he commanded for 1,000 generations, which he made with Abraham, and his oath to Yitzhak, and he established it to Jacob for a law, to Yisrael as an everlasting covenant, saying, to you I give the land of Canaan, the portion of your inheritance, when you were but few in number, few indeed, and sojourners in it. And they went up and down from one nation to another, and from one reign to another people. He allowed no one to oppress them, and he reproved sovereigns for their sake, saying, do not touch my anointed ones, and do my prophets no evil. Elohim is saying, do not touch my Moshiach, my anointed ones, which are his people. Let's read in Daniel 9:26 again. And after the 62 weeks, the anointed shall be cut off and have naught. So Elohim's people were cut off as well, not just the priesthood, but they were cut off and they have nothing again, as not only is the temple gone, the whole city is destroyed. That is another possible meaning to the Messiah shall be cut off and have naught, or nothing. The anointed, the people of Elohim, are cut off. They have nothing over there. It's all destroyed. Once again, as you can easily see, this has absolutely nothing to do with a New Testament Messiah. Not at all. Well, I hope this video blessed you and it brought more understanding to Daniel chapter 9, which can be pretty confusing or misunderstood, especially when it's pulled out of context, or understood, I should say, out of context, when it's completely twisted by those in religion, the Christian church, or Messianics, when they're trying to fit their imaginary narrative of some kind of New Testament Messiah, or at least connect it to Daniel chapter 9. Doesn't fit, it's not supposed to be there, and it's actually mentioned nowhere in the New Testament. So that's a big clue. So shalom to all worldwide in the dispersion who are truly Yisrael. Everybody be blessed and have a wonderful day.